Performance reports and user sessions. When we want to measure the performance of the application, we're going to want to measure lots of different things. For example, we would like to measure the amount of requests or the amount of activities that are being performed in the platform. For example, it's not the same to have 10 requests or 10 processes, for example, per hour, than 10,000. We would also want to measure the platform server. So we need to be able to measure the connection speed between the user's device and the application server. Besides, we also want to be able to measure the connection speed between the application and the database server. And we should also be able to measure the user equipment and his resources. For example, if there's enough bandwidth or if the performance in his computer is good enough. But obviously, besides all of this, it's important that the application designer knows how to implement solutions in a way that he's not affecting the performance, in a way that he's not creating performance issues. This is something we're going to see later on during this course, but for now we're going to see a series of reports that are available in structure, administration, performance. So if we go to structure, we'll find this report. It's called Performance Analytics. And if I go to the first tab that says Forms, I can monitor the performance of the forms. Here's going to tell me the form ID, the average amount of time in which it takes the form to open, the minimum amount of time, and the maximum amount of time. Besides, if I enter, I can drill down to the information. Here I can even see in different charts, by time, by day, or statistical distribution, how much time it's taking to open the form. Here I can see that most of the time it's taking me about 2 seconds. And then there is some specific or very sporadic scenarios in which it's taking more time. This is probably due to maintenance that's happening in the server, or maybe changes were applied in the form. So every time we enter a form and we modify the look and feel, or we make changes, and we reopen the form, it might take a little bit longer. That's why when we enter these forms, we've got a little pop-up message at the bottom that tells us that maybe the performance was affected by changes that have been made in that form. So these times in which it's open maybe once or twice and it took so many seconds, that's probably because of these very sporadic activities that are being performed. And obviously we can't take them into account. This is not reliable data. What is reliable is all of this, or let's say this number here would be the most reliable data that we could use in order to know how much it's taking for this form to open. Usually what we want to do is take a sample of about 80% of the data. Usually 80% is reliable, and we want to discard the rest. So what we can do here is select, instead of 100, select 80, and that way we can delete all of this data that isn't really reliable. Besides, here in this grid, it's going to tell me, or it's going to give us more information on why the form is taking longer to open. For example, if something appears in yellow, that's an alert. It means that maybe there's quite a few conditions here. But if I see things in red, that means that definitely that's going to be affecting performance. So sometimes we can see a form with 2,000 conditions. Obviously that would appear in red, giving us more information about what is actually making this form perform a little slower. So here we have all the different filters. Here we'd see all the options highlighted in yellow or in red if there might be something affecting the performance. And then here we can see the different graphics. If I go to the next tab, that's called Segments of Execution, I can measure the performance of the computer that's accessing the platform. I can also make tests between this computer and the application's server. And I could also make tests between the application server and the database server if they're in two different servers. And there's all kinds of different tests. So each time I click on one of these options, all the different tests can appear down here, and the results would appear at the bottom. If I go to BPMS motor, we'd see the same report that I showed you guys earlier during this session. So I'm just going to skip that part. And when we go to user activity, here I'm going to be able to measure the performance or the activities of a certain user within the system. So when we go to structure, we can see the option performance. Here we would access all these reports I just mentioned. If I go to segments of execution, here I need permissions from admin portal because this might affect the performance in the system. So it's restricted unless we give an administrator permissions. Then we have the BPMS motor activity and the user's activity. All I have to do is select the user here and monitor his activity during a certain date. Now, when I go to this other option that's called user sessions, I have several logs of information about users. This is especially interesting for those who have acquired, who are using concurrent licenses. So first of all, if I click here on user session, I can see all the users that are logged in. I can also go to sessions log, and here I'm going to see more information like the date, if their login was successful, and from what IP they logged in. If I go to concurrence log errors, I'm going to be able to see if there was any error, if someone wasn't able to log into the system because of concurrency. This option here, it's only interesting for those who are using concurrent licenses. So here I don't have any, that's why there's no information. And when I go here to user activity control, I'm going to be able to kick people out of the system after some time, for example, after 30 minutes of inactivity. Besides, I can limit the time for inactive sessions. I can say, yes, I want to limit it. So this is going to be the amount of time. Maybe I only want to limit it for the concurrent licenses I have. And here I can kick them out. And besides, if something ever happens, not only do I have the information here where it says concurrence error log, but I can also notify someone. So I can indicate an employee here that would be notified each time someone cannot enter into the system because there's not enough licenses. As I'm saying, these two are specifically important for those who are using concurrent licenses.